Ladies and gentlemen, let me recap some key points of my presentation in English. I've published 2 investigation reports today. The first one concerns 4 complaints about human resource management. And the complaints were lodged against 4 organizations, namely the Hospital Authority, Christian Louboutin Asia Limited, Star Entertainment Universe Limited, and An Yue Health and Beauty Limited. In the first 2 cases relating to Hospital Authority and Christian Louboutin Asia Limited, the supervisors in question improperly disclosed data about the complainant's illnesses in instant messaging application chat groups. And in the first case relating to Star Entertainment Universe Limited, the company continued to use a former employee's personal data as the registered user of a corporate bank account after he had left employment. And in the last case, relating to An Yue Health and Beauty Limited, the company used the old address of a former employee for filing a tax return and for mailing a tax return to him. For the first 2 cases relating to HA and Christian Louboutin, the Hospital Authority and Christian Louboutin Limited collected the personal data in question for the purposes of processing the complainant's sick leave application and for the purposes of staff redeployment. However, in both cases, the supervisors in question disclosed the complainant's physical condition to members of instant messenger chat groups that were set up for work-related purposes. And I consider that such disclosure was beyond the original purpose of the collection of personal data. According to Data Protection Principle 3 of the Privacy Ordinance, personal data shall not, without the prescribed consent of the data subject, be used for a new purpose. In other words, if you use personal data for a new purpose, you will need to obtain the data subject's consent. And in both of these cases, I consider that the disclosure of the complainant's physical condition to members of a work-related chat group constituted a new purpose, and such disclosure was without the complainant's respective consents. Therefore, I conclude that both HA, the Hospital Authority, and Christian Louboutin contravene Data Protection Principle 3 of the Privacy Ordinance as regards the use of personal data. In the third case, relating to Star Entertainment Universe Limited, the complainant is a former accounting staff. At the time when he worked for the company registered him as one of the users of online banking of an associated company. After he left employment, the complainant kept receiving SMS alerts from the bank in relation to the account through his mobile number. The complainant relayed this situation to the company in question and asked them to stop using his personal data for banking purposes. However, his requests were not followed up. That's why the complainant lodged a complaint with my office. And under the law, in particular under the Privacy Ordinance, the complainant's personal data can only be used for the purpose of handling employment-related matters or for a purpose to which the complainant had consented. However, in this case, although the complainant had agreed to use his personal data for the purposes of the company's bank accounts, such consent had been withdrawn when the complainant left the employment of the company. However, in this case, we found that the company continued to use the complainant's personal data for the purposes of the bank accounts for the company. And such continuous use of the complainant's personal data, despite the withdrawal of his consent, constituted a contravention of Data Protection Principle 3 as regards the use of the complainant's personal data. In the last case relating to An Yue Health and Beauty Limited, the complainant in question updated An Yue of a change in his residential address when he was still with the employment with the company. And after he had left employment, the complainant did not receive the 2023 tax return from the company. The complainant later found out that his old address had been entered in the tax return, and the tax return in question was sent to his old address. Our investigation found that the old address still appeared in the company's tax information file, notwithstanding that the company had updated the complainant's residential address in the company's personnel records. Our investigation also found that the company had no policies or procedures in place on the verification and updating of the tax information file when there was a change in personnel records. And the staff in question simply used the address shown on the tax return for mailing the return to him. In the circumstances, I consider that An Yue has contravened the requirements of Data Protection Principle 2 as regards the accuracy of personal data, because although the complainant in this case had already informed the company of a change in his residential address, and the company did update its personnel records, the information in the tax information file was still incorrect and still contained the complainant's old address. In addition, I also find that the company in question has contravened Data Protection Principle 4 as regards the security of personal data. And given that the 4 organizations in question have all contravened data protection principles under the Privacy Ordinance, I've served enforcement notices on the 4 organizations, directing them to remedy and prevent recurrence of respective contraventions. Let me now turn to the second investigation report, which relates to unauthorized scraping of the personal data of Carousel users. The investigation arose from a data breach notification launched by Carousel Limited, the Hong Kong company representing Carousel in Hong Kong, reporting that a listing posted on an online forum offered for sale the personal data of 2.6 million Carousel users, including the personal data of over 320,000 users in Hong Kong. The data breach incident was caused by a security vulnerability relating to the system migration, which took place in January 2022. And although the Hong Kong company, Carousel Limited, was at all material times using the information systems and database under the centralized model of the Carousel Group, we consider that Hong Kong company, Carousel Limited, still constituted a data user under the Privacy Ordinance, and it has a positive duty to safeguard the security of the personal data under its control. From the evidence collected in the investigation, I consider that the data breach incident have been caused by the following deficiencies on the part of the Hong Kong company: failure to check whether a privacy impact assessment was conducted before the system migration, failure to check whether a comprehensive code review process was implemented before the system migration, and failure to ensure a thorough security assessment was conducted in relation to the system migration. And fourthly, the Hong Kong company also failed to check whether there was a written policy for the code review process. This is because if such written policy were in place, this would have minimized the risk of human errors and human deviations from the established process. Lastly, the Hong Kong company also failed to ensure that effective detective measures were implemented. Given all these failures, I find that the company was in contravention of Data Protection Principle 4. I'm very disappointed to note that the occurrence of the incident revealed fundamental failures by Carousel to ensure the security of the personal data of its users. And there were clear deficiencies on the part of the Hong Kong company, Carousel Limited, to review and ensure that proper checks, policies, and measures were in place in relation to the execution of the system migration, which led to the leakage of the data affecting over 320,000 data users in Hong Kong. In the circumstances, I find that Carousel Limited contravened Data Protection Principle 4 concerning the security of personal data. I've therefore served an enforcement notice on the company, directing it to remedy the contravention and also to prevent recurrence of similar contraventions in future. And with that, I've come to the end of my presentation.